All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, with you as always to have another fantastic show with a very interesting and inspirational guest for me even. Today we have Patricio Mendez, or I should say Dr. Patricio Mendez from CCWJ and the University of Alberta. Patricio, how are you? ¿Cómo estás?
Hola Max, tanto tiempo. Finally we get to connect.
So how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited. We finally are getting through the podcast that has been advertised so many times in previous issues, and we have discussed for long, and it's finally a reality. I'm glad.
Well, you know, we talked about it right before the podcast started about how it's so easy to say, yeah, let's connect, but then so difficult to actually connect.
Yeah. But
It's
the beauty is that difficult, yes, but impossible, no, and it's happening. This and much
yeah,
more.
yeah, it always comes to fruition if you put your mind to it. And I have this belief, and it's kind of a weird belief. I'm not a spiritual person. Like I don't believe in religion or anything like that, but I do believe in energy, and I believe in physics, and I believe that as a entity or a machine or a being that consumes energy, we also give off energy, and it's whether it's a radial energy on many different levels. And one of the precepts of all matter is that like attracts like, and that is just a simple principle of physics that is inescapable. And if we push out ideas, which are energy that we create in our heads, if you put out those ideas and those thoughts and those wants and beliefs, I feel that you'll get one step closer to getting them just by thinking about them. So that's step one. You know, you got to keep talking about it, and then it happens.
Max, I'm 100% with you on that. And, you know, sometimes you wish you could fix the world or save the world. But in reality, this our antenna doesn't have so much reach. However, I do believe we can start with what is around us, and what is around us retransmits. And I think that the world is possible. It's just like having a little bit of patience and love. And I agree with you. It's a propagation of energy or something good around. Yes.
Good. So for the people that are listening into the show and don't know who you are, you know, I would say that many people in Canada definitely would know who you are, and maybe even internationally, many people I talk to know your name. I guess, you know, what do you do for a living? Let's start there. You know, where do you work and what do you do in, you know, to explain it to the average welding listener that we have?
Yeah. So what do I do for a living? To some extreme extent, I'm living the dream because I'm a professor at the University of Alberta. I'm surrounded in a world. I live in a world of ideas and a world of trying to help people who actually typically end up helping me. And it's they have the huge privilege of having started the Canadian Center for Welding and Joining. That is an initiative that was born in industry, came to the university, and the university was receptive. This we're talking about this in the late 2000s. I came to U of A in 2009, and has been an amazing adventure in which I have learned so much. I have shared so much. I have met awesome people, and now I'm surrounded by all these students that came out of the lab, all the partners we had, and all the other people who love welding and think it's cool to hang out and nerd out about it.
Now, when you talk about the Canadian Center of Welding and Joining, that covers a lot of stuff. So are we talking also plastics? Are we also talking maybe silicas and glasses? Or any type of crystal structures? Are we talking just like the steels and alloys, or, where does your heart lie with your work there?
Good. So welding and joining is kind of a catch-all, right? From like gluing paper to some extent. And many of the fundamentals are the same often, but the applications are very different. We have focused more than anything else on what is welding of two metals. And funny enough, although saying welding and joining, we include things like gluing, right? We have done a lot of something that is neither welding nor joining, that is overlays, right?
Mhm.
In which you put weld material with weld machines on top of a plate, but you're not putting two things together, right? So maybe we should have extended our name in that direction, because that's what we did. That's what, for example, your previous podcaster Nairn did, or your previous podcaster Gentry did, right? This overlay thing.
Mhm.
But if we ever want to do plastics, for example, we have a bit of knowledge that can be extrapolated, and we have an amazing laser that could do it, right? Sometimes it's a matter of opportunity.
Yeah, and it's something that, as a teacher, you kind of explain that sometimes to students in the beginning when you start talking about some of the basics of welding. So, for example, soldering, how soldering is like a joining of metals, but not welding. And it's much more like gluing paper together, the capillary attraction into the gaps and then solidifying. And really, it doesn't change much. It's kind of just a different medium, right?
100%. So, look, you can put two things together by melting them, and they come together, but they have to be able to melt, right? That's the case of
Hmm.
welding. You can put them together with something that melts, but you don't melt the base, whether it's a glue or brazing or soldering, right? And
Hmm.
also sometimes you can put two things together because you beat them to death, like in forge welding and many more advanced processes that in the end are the same.
Explosion welding, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I,
We discuss all that in the welding class, and the students all of a sudden realize that, hey, welding is all this. Okay, there's no end to it.
yeah, no, it's never ending, But before we get too far into the interview, we gotta go a few steps back. All right.
Okay.
So for some people that have noticed in the beginning, we said some Spanish words to each other, and Castellano, and we
Yes.
and we have some similarities. So I was born in Mendoza, Argentina, and you may hear that Patricio has a little bit of an accent, just a little bit. So, Patricio, where are you from? Where were you born? Where were you raised?
The charming accent is from Argentina, and I was born in the city of Buenos Aires. There is a 12 million people city. It's quite comparable to Toronto. Go type of city, right? And I lived since I was 2 years old in the same house until I left at 27 to study abroad.
And then when you were being raised in Buenos Aires, what did your mom and dad do? Like what type of school did you go to? What were some of the things that interested you to, like, I mean, what you do now is far from home and very interesting. So, as a small child, what were the influences there?
Oh, I can tell you much. So my dad is an engineer, mechanical engineer, and to some extent he's more of a true engineer than I am, because my dad is a type of engineer who can fix everything, right? I'm more of the type of guy who can think, but I'm
Hmm.
not too sure I get things done, right? But he for sure, he's a real thing. My mom taught arts and history of art in high school for a long time, and both taught me lots of things, not so much by the act of teaching me, but because they loved what they did. well, they still love my dad. Both are alive, and both you cannot take the engineering and the arts from each of them.
Hmm.
And so I grew up thinking how cool these machines are and the things you can make, and hearing from my mom about the Greeks and the Romans and the things they built and their art. How I ended up in engineering. I never chose to be an engineer. I always knew. I knew I wanted to make machines. I'm the kind of kid who sees a race car and cries with emotion, but I never cared about being a race car driver. I wanted to design the race cars. I see airplanes, and my heart feels strongly. But I never wanted to be a jet fighter pilot, right?
Hmm.
So it was, and I'm interested in the laws of nature and physics, but I never wanted to be a physicist. I just wanted to make something, and I am today the same kid I was in kindergarten, like putting together cars however I could. I'm more or less the same guy, just I know more math, so all that is disguised.
Math is the key.
I don't know. Math is a tool, and it's a tool I
Hmm.
love. It's not the tool for everybody, and it's not the only tool. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. I had someone say to me that math is a language, and people always throw the term around that math is a language, but they don't tell you that you can still communicate without that language. So I said, yeah, okay, fair enough, but it is a useful language. Um, so you went to high school, you came out, you said you already knew you were going down that engineering stream. Now I don't know about Argentina, but in Chile, you get to like kind of start to try the trades out in like grade 10, and did you have that opportunity, or did you just stay completely, academic from high school, or did you start getting your hands dirty a little bit?
Oh, good question. About my hands dirty, 100%. I grew up in a would be upper middle class family, so I had my own room, and in my own room I had a workshop. So from very little, I learned to use tools. My dad, as I mentioned, is an engineer, but a real guy who can make things. He built two camper trailers. And to do that, he had to teach himself welding. And actually, he taught me. So for the amount of math I know, I'm fairly good. I am uncommonly good at getting pliers. I can tell a plier from a hammer, but most people like me can't. And I could even weld, although uh, I wouldn't be under any bridge I weld or next to any vessel I weld. But yeah, so my hands were dirty and happily dirty. I would make cars and planes and all kind of things. My high school in Argentina, the system, which I think is unique, is quite amazing. If you want to go into the trades are done in high school. And so instead of doing a K-13 with 5 years of high school, that's the way we did it. They do a K-12 with 5 years of high school. They do a K-13, people who want to do the trades. And so you finish at 18 or 19 with a trade, and those guys are amazing. Now, in my case, I was so set on doing engineering that I wanted to save that 1 year. I don't know what it changed, because now at this age, you realize years come and go so easily. But at the time, I, I'm on a mission.
And so did you go straight to university then? And did you go to the University of Buenos Aires and for engineering, or what was your first thing that you studied in university?
Oh, yes, I went straight to the University of Buenos Aires, and mechanical engineering. And it is interesting. If you compare with North American programs, you typically have a first year in which you kind of figure out, even if you wanted to do engineering, physics, or biology. But in that case, I was 17, first year, and you already have mechanical engineering classes. And if you do any other engineering, you're already on a different track. So you're
Mhm.
committed, and it's a very intense program, much very different than what we have here. So yeah, I went straight to university, and I felt surrounded by all these other geeks like me, right? Like all these kids that, hey, let's learn this thing that is fairly dry and abstract, and you feel you're in the trenches studying with them. To me, it was an amazing experience. I don't think everybody would say the same, but to me, it was.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you find that feeling of camaraderie in education where it's like, we are all in this together, and especially with some friends, and some of them are going to be better at some things than you, and you kind of study with each other and try to help each other. You end up doing that your whole life. Like, I mean, if you think you can be successful in any job without the help of the people around you, forget about it, right?
Yeah, well, many people think they're self-made. I don't believe in that. Uh, the caveman did not make rockets just out of sheer will, right? They did it
Yeah.
as over thousands of years of a society. Yeah.
hmm Now, you went into mechanical engineering. Did you love mechanical engineering right through? Because I know many, well, I know, in my trade, I've dealt with many engineers, but I've noticed that many of them sometimes will shift. They will move from one type of engineering to another, or maybe end up working doing something that they didn't study. Was mechanical engineering everything you thought it was going to be, and you just were focused on graduating and getting a job?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it so much that the people seeing the podcast are not going to see this, but we can describe. This is on my desk, and I didn't have it prepared. You see this book I'm showing you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this book is Halliday Resnick's Physics, third edition. That's what I read when I was in first and second year in physics. That's what I'm reading now as part of my COVID task of just trying to relive those happy moments and remember what I forgot. I loved it, and I never wanted. It's funny, never wanted to be anything else. Even within engineering, what I liked of mechanical engineering is this belief that if you understand things, you can design something that doesn't exist. Not all engineerings are like that. For example, materials engineering, where I teach now, is much more complex than mechanical engineering, but it is so complex in a way that you can seldom make a prediction and see it's true. For example, welding is part of materials engineering. If you have to weld on steel, chances are that through your experience, you know what to do. But if I give you a material you have never seen, or a machine or a type of process you have never seen, there's no body of engineering that says, okay, this is the way you think about it, and then you try it's likely to be good. No, you have to start welding until it works,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm so much of a mechanical engineer that now that I'm in materials engineering and doing welding, the guys in the lab and I are all in this mission of trying to make these engineering rules to understand welding in such a way that weird welds we should be able to predict before we start trying without much knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, you when you finished university, what was your first job? What were you doing?
Oh,
I don't imagine you fell right into welding's lap, but maybe you did.
okay. Yes and no. So my program was nominally 6 years. Right? It had like 6 semesters of calculus, 4 semesters of algebra, 5 semesters of physics, 5 semesters of electrical engineering, 2 semesters of law. Crazy, right? So you start working before you finish. So maybe the first time I started doing my gig of tutoring kids and making some pocket money, pocket
Mm-hmm.
cash, and I worked like downloading a truck of wines from Mendoza. That gave
Mm-hmm.
me
Yeah.
cash. But eventually, the thing where things started to take a turn is I got a job doing research in sponsored by the university in a national lab on wind turbines. So that was before I graduated. I did that for 3 years, which was amazing. And still before graduating, I started to work in a company that now is called Tenaris, of which there are like all over the world, including Canada, Edmonton, in Saskatchewan. I'm pretty sure they have a facility. And that was steel making, involving welding too. And that's how I started to get close to materials. So I had those 2 jobs in Argentina: wind turbines, steel making, and then I went to study in the U.S. I was not too young. I left at 27, but yes, I was too inexperienced because I had only those 2 jobs before I got back to study again.
So what was the deciding factor there? It sounded like you had I guess a sufficient life. You have a job, you finish school, probably were doing okay. Why decide to pick up and pack up the bags and go to the US? What for?
It's the dream. What was the dream of studying and living a life in a world of ideas. I always wanted that, and I wanted to study more and learn more, to explore what it would be. I never planned on outright immigration, and so when I went there in 1993, I told all my friends, okay, let's start planning for the celebrations for the new millennium. Because I should be back
by 2000.
Long before. Yeah, long before. Everything was good for me. But it's I really wanted to explore and go deeper. Deeper is always meaningful to me for whatever reason. And the moment I landed in Boston, I was like, dang, it's like the sky's open and the angels sing, right? Like if I told you that at the university they were all geeks like me, now I'm in a place that is even closer to what I was, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you have like 7 universities within like 5 blocks.
Well, it was crazy, but not only that, like people living in a world of ideas is not for everybody, and but for me was fantastic. Like if you go to a bar and have a drink with a friend or a random person sitting next to you, everybody had ideas for startups and things to do, and I found that so exhilarating to me.
So where did you go in Boston? What college did you go to, and what program did you start taking?
So I went to do graduate studies in materials engineering at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I started my master's, and then I could transfer to my PhD straight. But I decided to still do my master's, and I did my master's in welding actually. But a very special thing is it's the early 90s. And we are exploring, and things of additive manufacturing are just starting. And like those machines that everybody has in their house now that use plastics, like the PLA, those things, we decided to do one of those machines using metal. So our master's advisors had the idea, if the metal was kind of half solid, half liquid, and you process it right, it flows like the plastics, and you can make parts. So one of my friends led a master's on that, which was amazing. And my advisor got a patent on that. And then I thought, hey, all this material called semi-solid, we could use it as a glue for welding, right? It would be like not brazing and not gluing, but still like, and we got a patent for that, and a publication in the welding journal. That was super interesting. I haven't made any money out of that, but I think it was an awesome story.
And then you continued on to do your PhD there at MIT?
Yes. I did my PhD. I my first advisor with whom we did the semi-solid experiments, he, in the academic system of universities in North America, after so many years, there is a tenure decision. So this was a young professor and didn't get tenure. He left. So I moved on to another professor who was working on welding. Based on my experience with these semi-solids, said, "Oh, I would like you to work with me." So yeah, okay. And now this other professor with whom I started my PhD, that professor passed away during my studies. That was terrible. And I moved to a third advisor, Tom Eagar, that is quite famous in the world of welding, where we started to work in high current TIG. And and then the rest is history. Then I was deeper into welding, and my path was quite set.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a good time to take a break, and then when we get back from our break, we'll delve into the journey post-grad, now post-PhD studies, which for many people is the most daunting period of the professional life, because now school is done and it's time to put your words to action. So we'll be right back here with Patricio Mendez on the CWB Association podcast. Make sure you don't go anywhere. And we're back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and we have Dr. Patricio Mendez from the Canadian Centre of Welding and Joining, the University of Alberta, coming to me from his beautiful studio where he has a bunch of musical equipment, which we already talked about because I'm a musician, and he says he's not a musician, but I see some pretty good equipment there. So I think he's understating his skill.
So
All right. So right before the break, Patricia, we were talking about finishing school. And for a lot of people, that's a different thing. It could be finishing high school, and that's as far as you want to go, and the rest of life is very scary because now it's time to get to work, and it's people sometimes stay in school. The professional student. I know people that are working on their second, third PhDs, and I think that they just stay in school so that they don't have to work. But that's always just a joke because school's hard. But for you now, post-grad, it sounded like your PhD journey was complex. So what happens now? You're in Boston. Boston's, from what I hear, is a fantastic place to study, but there's not a lot of work around there. So what do you do?
Oh, interesting. I actually, there is lots of work, even including welding. But let me tell you, when you write your PhD, most people believe they're not going to finish. The vast majority, that included me. So that sucks all your energy. So you write your PhD, and most smart people write their PhD, defend, and then they go and do whatever else they wanted to do. I wrote my PhD, defended, and then I was, oops, I need a job. So I finished with zero, absolute zero plans, and talked to my advisor, Tom Eagar, said, well, can I stay in the lab sometime longer? And his answer was, well, didn't you tell me that you thought all this academic life was stupid? And which I had done, because I thought it's too much work for too little pay. But I had to suck up my words, and I did quite a bit of work in the lab that was amazing. I learned so much more. I interacted with people from industry, and but as a postdoc, you have all the perks of a student, but none of the responsibilities. But that's eventually you have to move on, and I became a consultant. So I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do academics or not. I became a consultant in a company called Exponent that does technical consulting, but in typically high-profile cases. So the engineers have billing rates like lawyers, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so I was a single guy. I'm a consultant. I don't know what to do with the money. I thought, who's going to love me for who I am, not for my money? But my call was, I realized then that my call was to be a mentor and to be in a world of ideas. In consulting, you deliver results. And I was reasonable at that. But the real excitement came in the conversations, saying who was at fault when there is a failure. There is money, and you need to be smart. But I don't find it exciting. Others do. So after graduating and doing my postdoc, then I was a consultant. And then it was clear in me that I wanted to be a mentor and live in this world of ideas more than deliverables, and became a professor. Yeah.
So, it's very interesting how you bring up this idea of the different, I guess, positions you can take on the same situation. Like you can look at a welding, say, defect, something has gone wrong, okay? And I'm talking on site, the product's out in the field and the weld breaks. This is now a catastrophic failure, the term, and there's a lot of blame to throw around, right? And everyone's looking who to blame, and it's very easy to say, oh, the engineer. Generally, that's where you start. The engineer did something wrong. It's a stupid print. No one else screwed up. After the engineer clears his, blame, then generally you go to materials. Oh, there was bad materials. We got the wrong materials. Something wrong with the materials. And then further down the line, you get to the people involved with the joining. So that'll be the welders. What was the process with the welding or the welding machines or the wire or the consumables? There's always that train. I've always been fascinated by that prospect. I've worked for some very interesting companies, and mistakes happen. Things happen. Products fail. It's part of the learning process of any company. And sometimes they're quite expensive mistakes that are very simple solutions, but very expensive mistakes in the process of figuring it out. Now, I've been approached many times in my life where people have asked me, why are you not a weld inspector? Or why have you not gone down the NDT line? Or why have you not gone down that side of the career? Because it fascinates me as a welder, fabricator, manager, the business side of it, fascinated by that process and how to improve and how to make things better. But I have never wanted to be on the other side of it where I'm looking to see where to place the blame. You know what I mean? The inspector side of it. I have zero interest in doing that.
Of course, Max. Like, look, I talked about many times about a world of ideas without defining it. But let's say there is a weld that has a problem. You can start discussing who's at fault, and there's money in it, and maybe there is perhaps some amount of progress. That doesn't excite me. In front of the same weld with a problem, what I would love to is, let's talk to the welder, let's talk to the supplier, and maybe there is a boo-boo, and if it is a foolish boo-boo, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. And if it is something really deep, now it got exciting, right? But so as a consultant, I could go through the moves, but
not so fun.
Yeah, not my thing.
So then when you decided, okay, I want to teach, I went to school for philosophy initially. So I had this dream at one point when I was young to be a philosophy teacher, which some of my friends went on to do, and very proud of them to maintain for their PhD in philosophy, which I don't think I would have had the structure for, but they end up teaching in colleges, and sometimes that's hard to get in. Where did you get your first gig teaching? What was that role? What kind of classes were you teaching when you first started getting into it?
Right. So, hey, by the way, philosophy is the part that I treasure the most in my degree. I'm a doctor of philosophy. The doctor, I don't care much. The philosophy, I'm with you. That's where things are. So I was a consultant doing okay and doing better than okay. And I applied to some universities, and eventually became a professor at Colorado School of Mines. Colorado School of Mines is one of the two universities in the US that have a large welding program. And I went there in 2004 as a professor on tenure track. In retrospect, I realized how difficult it is to get into these type of programs. I think much of my life has been signed by my ignorance of what I'm doing and the consequences I go. And when it goes right, I say, oh, yeah, right. But yes, and I was in Colorado and I taught, funny enough, I taught some classes on materials engineering, like diffusion, phase transformations, but I was also in charge of the foundry. And that was amazing. We had to commission a foundry and to run the foundry, which it has some similarities to welding, and many of things I learned I brought with me. Many differences. Each welder has a welding machine. In a foundry, it's one furnace for everybody there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I did. Yeah.
So, and how long were you there teaching that?
I was at Colorado School of Mines for 4.5 years.
And you said you were tenure track. So, what took you off track? What made you get out of there?
Well, I actually shortcutted the track
Okay.
because I'm in Colorado happily riding my bicycle up Mount Evans and doing all those things. I met my wife, I had my daughter, and I happened to meet Mary Armuch from Edmonton too, who was giving a presentation on a topic in which I had worked. He says, "Oh, look, we're looking for people like you in for the university for a welding programming in Canada, whatever." And then he introduced me to Doug Schindel, and Doug Schindel was the president and CEO of Weldco Industries. And that same day. And that day I didn't go to any talk. I spent the whole day talking with Doug Schindel, and was very interesting what he was saying. Eventually, they called me from the University of Alberta and said, "Please send your application." And it was amazing because I wasn't planning on a move, and there's no better way of interviewing that way when you have nothing to lose. I told them exactly who I was. I told them exactly what I thought, and they liked it, and has been a truly amazing thing. So what took me off track? No, they say, "Why don't you come?" And then I'm talking with the dean about what lab we could make, all the dreams for the future. And he takes a pause and says, "You know, this position has tenure, right?" "Yes." "Okay, we keep talking about the lab." That was my tenure case.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what you said about when you interview with nothing to lose. I tell people, young people that are starting their careers, that I say, you know what? There's two ways to run. You can run towards something, or you can run away from something. Right? And if you're running towards something, you're going to succeed. If you're running away from something, you're destined for failure. So think about that when you're making your moves. Sometimes you get the urge to run, right? In life, it just happens. Sometimes you get the urge to run. But think, am I running away from something or am I running towards something? Because if I'm running away from something, don't. Figure it out, straighten it out, figure out what's going on. But if you're running towards something, go. Just go for it. Because it's probably going to be good.
Yeah, Max, I didn't have many mentors in my life that would sit down and tell me some words of wisdom. I think often I would have needed those, but I've been fortunate that very often I really felt passionate about something, so I would do it in full ignorance of the risks and consequences. But so many good things that happened in my life, I cannot take credit for them. They were a coincidence. And the fact that I took them is not because I was seeking them out. So maybe I can give credit myself of having acted on the opportunities when they were there, but that's about as far as I can go.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, right? Now, what did the new wife with the new baby, who I assume are they American? Are they from Colorado?
No. You know this. You
Oh,
know this.
right. I forgot. Yes. So
So
your wife is from Chile.
yes, exactly. My wife Gloria is a geologist from Chile, and and uh, and my daughter Sol, she was born in the U.S. So when we moved to Canada, we had three different passports in the family, none of which was the passport of the country in which we lived. Tell me about international travel with that. Oh yeah.
Well, good thing you did it before 2000. Then that gets really complicated now.
Well, no. Yeah. Before. Oh, that's now we're fine. Now
Yeah.
my daughter has a collection of passports, and so,
I still have my Argentinian passport from when I was a baby. I still have it.
oh, look at that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So how the heck did you meet a Chilean geologist in Colorado? Aside from
Oh,
there being a lot of rocks there.
well, Colorado School of Mines, the name tells you something, right? Historically, it
Mhm.
was related to mines. So geology, that is what how you choose where to put a mine, or metallurgy, that is what you do, what you get out of the mine. That's the reason why we were there. When I was at MIT, I have many friends, and much to it is paradoxical. I partied there more than any time before or after. Although that's a hard school, but somehow, and many of my party friends were from Chile. Funny, mathematicians, who knew, right? Many mathematicians partying, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, Amazing friends. I'm in Colorado by myself. By the way, I didn't like to live by myself. I'm a roommate type of guy, so I
Hmm.
don't know what I was doing alone. But my friends from Chile uh, came to a conference in Colorado, and they say, "Hey, I ran into this old classmate of mine in Chile, and she's here in Colorado." And I was hosting a housewarming party because I had just moved. So no students at my party, because you might say something stupid and you're a professor. You don't want the students to keep track of that, right?
100%. Yeah.
and and he brought her anyway. And that's my wife now. And if you ask her, the first impression I made might not have been the best. Anyway,
So you married a student. That is scandalous.
it's nearly scandalous. She was a student in geology. I was a professor in materials. So legal was legal. But when I announced in a faculty meeting that I was getting married, everybody is effusive. Oh, congratulations! Said, yeah. She's a student in geology. Whoop! The whole thing chilled off. Uh, hey, that's okay.
That's how life goes. That's how life goes.
It was meant to be.
So then she was okay with moving to Canada then? Everything, you know, I mean, was she was done her studies by the time you got offered the job to come?
Oh no.
No.
So if there is a lesson here, don't change countries before you finish your studies. So Gloria has her PhD, is working with that, but many people who listen will be able to relate that when women become moms, it's very difficult to keep professional life. If they are studying, it's very difficult, extra difficult.
Hmm.
Now, if they're doing a PhD, they become a mom, and then you change countries. Uh, Essentially, I think she could have climbed Everest twice and come down sooner than
Hmm.
with less effort than it took for her to finish her PhD. But she did, and it's amazing. It's an amazing thing. So yeah. She kept working when she was here in Canada, and her advisor in Colorado was super understanding and good. And when she defended, and then when her graduation, it felt like such a huge thing to all of us.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So now your role now so when you got hired, you were at the University of Alberta, correct?
Mm.
And now when you got hired, what was the job you got hired to do?
Good. So the university, the industry went to the university to create a welding program, and the university created this Weldco industry chair in welding and joining. So my task was to take the chair and create this welding program that had existed in the past, and for a few years after the previous professor retired, had disappeared. So we had to create a lab. And if I say from scratch, it's a lie. We had to create the lab from negative, because we got a lab and which we needed to take down to then rebuild. And it took lots of time, but it was an amazing thing. Something that I especially treasure of this job I have is we all have ideas of how the world should be run, what the right things are, and how things should be done. I'm not an exception, but I'm the one guy who had the fortune to say, all right, let's put your words to use.
Do
And
it.
we created this lab the way we thought was good. And so far, seems like it hasn't been all too bad.
Now, for the people that are listening that maybe are well versed with Alberta or even in Alberta, when you talk about creating a welding program, you're talking about creating a welding program for engineers or for the
Oh,
engineering level of theory or practical use, or explain the distinction, because people, there's Nate. People are going to say, well, why would you not just go to Nate for your welding program or for your weld instruction? And there is high level of welding instruction and theory metallurgy at the trades college or the polytechnic now. What's the difference between what you guys do and what say what's happening at Nate Polytech?
excellent point. Excellent point. So Nate and SAIT in Calgary are like very large programs that teach people to weld or teach people to understand the things around the trade, including the codes, the standards, the metallurgy, many things. But there are very few things, not too many, but these very few things is like firefighters. You need them seldom, but when you need them, you want them there, right? And that needed an amount of expertise that you couldn't buy off the shelves, mostly because the oil sands were the only operation of that type in the world. And so they needed materials and processes that didn't exist. So perhaps the best analogy of what welding engineers do is in an article I wrote for the Weld Journal. It's like an analogy with music. So in music, which you like and I like, right? Musicians have an amazing ear. Not me, but the real musicians have a good ear and a good hand, and they could do amazing things. So you go see the musicians and you're amazed. However, the musician needs an instrument. Not all musicians make their own instruments. Making the instruments, whether it's the welding machine or the welding electrode or the formulation, those are the type of things welding engineers do. Also, depends on the type of music, but if you listen to classical music, most of the time the music you're going to hear was made by a composer that is not the musician playing. And this composer that is telling the musicians, okay, you play these notes at these times and in this way, is very similar to the welding procedures in which you tell the welder you use so many volts, so many amps at this travel speed, right? That's another role of the welding engineer. So although you can play music without knowing the theory and making your own instrument, when things get difficult, you actually need the whole team. And our role in the team for welding engineers is this, like machines, the metallurgy, and the procedures and how you choose them.
And I would add also that at the university level, college level, there's generally much more of an appetite for research and development that a polytech will ever have access to. And not that a polytech or a trade school wouldn't love to be a part of research and development. And I know many partnerships occur and hopefully will continue to occur in the future. I know that's something that I was trying very hard to do when I was still working at the college level, but universities are much more focused in the future, the research and development of new processes and new technologies, and in the polytechs and the trade schools have to be a lot more involved with the today, the what do we have today in order for training purposes, you know?
Yes, yes, that is correct. And research is a very broad term, right? Sometimes research is understanding something that you can learn from experience. I think that's research. Some other times research means understanding, I don't know, the plasma physics, right? And for that you need different levels of preparation. Yeah, it's an amazing thing in that universities do research, and I treasure that. I think it's a privilege. It's also a responsibility because one of the mandates of our lab is that Canada should never be blindsided by a new technology or a new material. So if something is going to happen in the world of welding, at the very least we should know. And hopefully, not only we would know, but we would be first in line at making it happen for our community, right? And the research is a big part of that.
So, you know, this is now just completely, I have no idea how this works, but if you had to rank, you know, because you're talking about first in line, if you had to rank, say, a nation's ability or, you know, success in a trade, you know, where do you see Canada on the spectrum of welding research and fabrication and all that? You know, where do we sit on the spectrum worldwide? Are we at the
Oh,
top? Are we in the middle? Are we at the bottom? You know?
no, Max, we have not discussed this, but this is a loaded question because you know the answer. Canada is punches way above its weight in welding. Uh, I'm not fully certain why, but I am fully certain that it is a fact. Um, one of the recent presidents of the International Institute of Welding was our very own CWB CEO, Doug Luciani, right?
Correct.
If you go to international conferences, you're going to see Canadians all over the place. Um, it's in welding when you look at, for example, manufacturing base, significant amount of aluminum wire for the world, for welding in the world, comes from Canada, right?
Hmm.
Labs like mine are like the Canadian Center for Welding and Joining. I said mine because my heart is there, but it's much more than just mine. Uh, those are on par with, actually, I wouldn't not trade it for anything in the US or Germany or Japan. We should be a lot smaller to keep the proportion of Canada. It's anomalous. Maybe it's related to Canada having so many natural resources that require welding. Right? For example, right now in the International Institute of Welding, they have a program for young leaders, and they chose two people from all over the world to be involved in their board of directors. Well, one of those is from Canada,
Hmm.
right? I think that says something when it's yeah. Uh, for all of us, if those who might be listening here just are related to the world of welding, it's a reason to be enormously proud of how welding does in Canada in compare in the global map. Yeah.
You know, it was a bit of a loaded question, so you got me, but you know, and it's what I do for a living. I've worked all over the world, and I don't know if it's because I'm so talented, but partially because my experience and training has been Canadian. And the things I'm asked to do in different countries is basically just try to bring them up to Canadian standards inside of quotes. You know what I mean? Because to many places to be within Canadian standards would be a significant contribution to their company. You know what I mean? Um, but in terms of the success of Canada, I have a couple theories. Let me run them past you. Okay. So the first theory I have is that yes, the fact that we have so many raw natural resources, well, basically all of them. I could basically say we have pretty much all of them. Some other countries have more of, but I don't know if there's really any on the list we have none of. Over the size of our country, and especially in terms of the metals, we seem to have all of them. But aside from that, our immigration policy for the last 70 years or so has been very specific towards the trades. So when I was young, there's a reason we got placed in Saskatchewan as immigrants because my dad worked in Chile in the mining companies and he went to university for metallurgy. So when we came to Saskatchewan, we were off the plane in Regina and he was starting a job the next day. No English, no clothes, nothing. But there was a job waiting for him because of his expertise in that trade. And they wanted him to bring that to Canada. Right. And when I got older, I realized how important that is as we brought in the Russians to work on stainless steel and potash in Saskatchewan, because there's two biggest resources of potash in the world, Russia, Canada. And guess what? We brought in Russians to work at the potash mines in Canada. That's not an accident. We are buying their expertise through immigration. We're bringing their best workers over and they're going to teach us how they do it. We combine it with how we do it and we come up with better processes. You look at the Filipinos that have been coming over for the last 20 years now. All these Filipinos have worked in shipbuilding in Japan, Malaysia, Singapore. These welders have extensive knowledge of cladding, overlays, and ship construction. It's no accident that they're coming here to work in manufacturing for our country. So I think targeted immigration for trades has been something that I think many Canadians don't realize it's happening, but it is something that enriches our education system because it's sharing knowledge and learning from others is the fastest way to gain, you know.
Max, you bring a super interesting point. Well, being an immigrant, I want to believe it. That's a good thing, right? When we look at our lab, I have a photo in which we have 11 nationalities in this one photo of the lab, right?
Mhm.
And it was not by design, it's just by welcoming. Like you want, and I think it is true. Still, Canada has something especially good. Many countries, Canada is not the only country made out of immigrants, but somehow there's something that works especially well here in Canada. Maybe what you say, like bringing the trades and the people who can do something.
More specific.
Yeah, it's something is specific. But yeah, it's an amazing strength we have, and something that blows my mind is that how people who are working together might be killing each other elsewhere, but here they're working together amazingly.
Yeah.
And I feel like a better person when I'm part of that.
I know that I was teaching this innovative manufacturing course right before I actually took the job at CWB. And just because of the timing and immigration laws and enrollments, I had two full classes, so both classes of 12, 112, 113. And the one class was all from India. Like, oh, generally you never get a class all one country, but this was one full class from India. And the other one was like 80% from India. And all of them, so to take this course, there's quite a few prerequisites, and for immigrants to sign up for this course, basically you have to have an engineering degree already. So most of these students were either materials or mechanical engineers from India, and within the first couple days of school, there was some things that I noticed right away that they were very bad at. So they were all the types of engineers that had never seen a wrench, who had never seen a hammer, had never used a screwdriver. But part of the innovative manufacturing course is learning how to use all the machines by hand to learn how to, streamline processes so that you can actually contribute to a manufacturing company. So they were very far behind in that. And the non-Indian students in the course kind of were making fun of them, being like, how can you be an engineer and not know how to use a hammer? Like, what kind of crazy world is this? But then where they shined is in their competitive intellectual nature, because India has 1 billion people, and they are fighting for school, they are fighting for space. And these students, to be here in Canada, were the best of their classes to be able to immigrate here and take this course, which was not a cheap course to take, you know. And that's when, you say, okay, now let's do a project, and now we're going to make this project into groups, and we're going to make it a competition. Oh man, they would work 18 hours a day. They would create groups, they would organize themselves, they would give and so the non-Indian students wanted to be in all their groups. They're like, so we tried to split them up evenly, so everyone got split into kind of a mix. But those are the pluses and minuses of any country, just geography, population, economic stability, political stability. This creates a different framework in personalities, right? And that personality will have some drawbacks in some areas, but it will have some benefits in others. And that's how you make the perfect team,
I agree. It's and as being an immigrant, when I look in there, sometimes you come with a fire that is the fire that helped you live, right? Like you with some sort of a sense of mission, or sometimes a sense of fear of what you're leaving behind, right? But it is true. It's one amazing thing of North American universities, University of Alberta for sure, is that the research side that is important for many reasons, it trickles down into the teaching. So the students come to the lab, and if they never have seen a screwdriver and cannot tell it from pliers or a hammer, right? Now they do, right? And funny you mentioned, I have students from India in the lab who say, I already took a welding class, but we never saw a welding machine. And when we teach the welding class, they actually have to weld. They're not going to become good welders out of that, but they're going to know they can get burned. They know what it sounds, what it smells like,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they know it's not easy.
Yeah, that's very valuable. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what's some of the stuff? We're coming up to the end of the interview here. I want to discuss, I guess, without, maybe a little bit of detail because I'm interested, but what are some of the cool projects you're working on right now? I mean, there's some top secret stuff you can't talk about, but there must be some interesting stuff that listeners would be interested in knowing about, some of the cool stuff on the frontiers of Canadian research.
Oh, let me tell you about two that I think you're going to be hearing much more into the future. So I'll start with the one that is perhaps a bit more difficult to grasp. But remember when I mentioned that in welding, one of the roles of the welding engineer is to determine how many volts or how many amps, what the velocity, what materials to use. With modern processes like lasers, that is especially difficult because we don't have like these years of expertise that often we have in arc welding. So we have been working for many years in trying to predict how to make these laser processes work. And sometimes I mean, this belief at the success we have had, I think luck played a significant role. Um, Luck in just pure luck, and luck of people like Gentry Wood being involved. And we're in a position in which, if everything goes right, I think we can put Canada at the very top of the heap and using these very advanced processes, on which much of the future are going to revolve in which we can design a laser cladding, and we can do it economically and fast. So that is something that I find very exciting, and that has an impact right now in industry that is employing students that graduate, is selling Canadian product around the world, and having high value added things that have a high chance to stay. That's one of the projects. The other project that is easier to explain is we have a project called Zero Programming Repairs. And this is a concept when sometimes things get worn out and we do weld repairs. If we do the weld repairs by hand, that takes very long. Okay, so let's use a robot. But if you want to use a robot, it takes very long to program the robot. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And you can toss the part and buy a new one, which is typically what we do. But that's a waste of money. It's a crime against the environment. It's just foolish, right? When you have something that is 99% right, but you don't use it just because one detail. So what this project we have in the lab, we're using a 3D scanner to survey how a part is worn out. And from the data of the 3D scanner, the robot gets programmed by itself. And in this case, we're using a laser that is much in synergy with the other project, but doesn't need to be a laser, can be anything else. And with the data of the 3D scanner, the robot programs itself, and does the weld repair faster than by hand and faster than programming the robot. So that, I don't know, that's like science fiction. When you come to the lab and you see that, you say, wow, at the Starship Enterprise, yeah. So, yeah.
So when you have a project like that going, let's pick one, how many students you have working on this? How many people are working on one of these projects at any given time?
Good question. It is an ecosystem. So you typically have like a pyramid of responsibilities. You'd have a grad student doing a PhD or a postdoc, finish working on it. Those are the guys who need to drive it. But it's impossible for a single person to do it. So typically we have an army of undergraduate students or volunteers that come and participate. Sometimes they get paid by the faculty if they have good grades, but if they don't have good grades to get paid, I don't care. They can volunteer and learn. So projects like this, you would see in the one with the robot, there are two guys who are responsible, and there are about 4 or 5 more that are floating around. And sometimes, robots, the other guy might know lasers, and then you need to do the metallography. You need to go to our metallography expert that has a completely unrelated project. Mm-hmm. But it pitches in. That's one of the strengths. Yeah.
And then with your students, how many graduate a year? Like how many people are coming through this program in a year?
Oh, okay. So we take everybody. The youngest we had in the lab has been a kid that was in grade 8 in junior high. And then we have visiting professors and everything between, bachelor students, master students, PhD students, postdocs. When we talk about how many people go through the program, we can talk about how many come in. And we have about 40 or more every year involved in the lab. The bulk is these young people, many of which will love it, but not all of them, but all are exposed to welding. And they didn't know it. Much like welding, like Gentry and Nairn, they were among those. And how many come out with degrees? Those are relatively few, because each graduate degree, like a PhD or master's, requires a company to have put money on a concrete project. So we have recently graduated 4 PhDs, which doesn't seem like a big number, but graduating 4 PhDs in a year has been a pretty large number for us.
It is, yeah. And it is quite successful. If you think of 40 coming in the door and 2/3 of them, being sort of, I guess, non-stationary students, to have four actually be there. I mean, PhD is a 3-4 year process sometimes. That's fairly extensive. So
yeah, and you see that it's not everybody needs a PhD. Again, it's like firefighters. You don't need everybody to be firefighters. You need just what you need. What you need. So when you generate people with this amount of education, they are best employed in some particular places. And companies might have a few of those, but not too many. Some companies have none. And they do perfectly fine. Yeah.
Awesome. So, as we get towards the end of the interview here, this is your career. Do you see yourself in the future, where you are now? Or could there be some magical job out there? Maybe your boss is not listening, but maybe someone will come knock on your door and said, "Mr. Mendez, there is this opportunity for you." What would be that dream? Or are you in your dream now?
Oh, Max, I'm living the dream. Of course, you can pay me more. Of course, right? But look, I live in a world in which my currency is ideas, in which people work with me out of love, not out of money. They will make money eventually, but that's not the point of working with me now. I have the freedom of doing what I think is right, and I'll pay the consequences if I'm not. But I get to enjoy this intellectual freedom. I can pick the team around me. It's amazing. So the truth is, beyond any sense of loyalty, I cannot imagine anything better.
Mm.
If you say what could be, I would say, give me the same and more money, right? By the way, I'm not doing bad with money either, right?
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
an amazing country. So it's kind of odd to say, I'm full, because now maybe my boss is listening and say, okay, for you, I'm not worrying about you anymore. But look, places like Edmonton, that is, I think, might be the coldest or one of the coldest places in Canada. You know what? I have all the winter to play music and all the summer to go out on my bike and my kayak and run.
You're good.
What else is in life? Surrounded by amazing people. So, no, yeah, I expected this type of question, and I was racking my brain. What is the message? This is my chance to pass on a message, but
Hmm.
I I have it really good. I just hope it is. And I'll tell you, my dream towards the future is much the same, but I want to write a book. This
Ah,
this work with the students. If you think each student does a PhD or a master's, and I meet people from industry and I talk to the welders, and each of them knows their part, but I'm the one who heard them all. I'm the one guy who talks to all the welding companies. I'm like the father confessor, because I get to hear so many things, and the fundamentals of those are not secret. And I wish I could put them together, and I'm working very hard on that, and it's going very slow. So I would be the same guy with a book, and being a good husband and a good father, and good.
man, I've thought about writing a book 1,000 times. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start.
Oh, we can take it out offline, because I
Yeah.
have thoughts. Oh, you have no idea the effort that is going into that.
Awesome. And you say you've been preparing, so you know what the last question of the show is. What would be, and let's see, I got to figure out the angle here. If you are taking an engineering, so you have a, say, 21-year-old young student who's about to graduate from their engineering program in a Latin American country, and they want to ask you, what would be the one, really key point of wisdom you could give them to be a success, to succeed as an engineer? What would be the advice you would give this young person coming out of the engineering program?
Hi, Max. Yeah, I know. Let me tell you, your question has a statement embedded that is that I have any wisdom to share, and and I do know some math. I know a little bit of welding. I don't know if I have wisdom to share. I can tell you something. I have done what I loved and has paid off for me. I don't know if that goes for everybody. Some people don't feel things so intensely, right? But when I talk with the students, as has been the case of Gentry or Nairn, or Mackenzie and Jolene, who I think more than trying to make strategic moves, I think what is in your heart, because if you follow it, especially in a country like Canada, you're gonna go good places. So I wish I had like some amazing piece of wisdom to share with you after so many years of study, but
I feel like that was pretty wise. The basis of wisdom is knowledge times experience. So, knowledge you got in school and experiences over time. So that counts, my friend.
So yeah. But in the lab we have 6 rules. That rule number 1 is don't harm yourself or others. Number 2 is don't harm the equipment. But number 3 is do it with love. Love what you do, and I don't care what it is. Right. Number 4 is think. Right. Number 5 is work. But so I don't know, if you do something you love, things are gonna fall in place. If you're kind to people, good things happen. That's how we've been trying to be. I'm not sure it always worked out that way, but we really tried that way, and has paid off for the other guys from the lab and has paid off for me. So maybe there is something there.
Yeah, no, I think that's key. It's easy to put in extra effort when you love something, because work and love go very hand in hand. And if you love something, you can put in so much work and it doesn't drain you. It doesn't kill you. You feel good about the work you did because you love it. When you don't love something, work is hard and it tires you and drains you, and it's you don't want to continue. So it's a very key thing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult to get out of that rut, right? And I acknowledge that. I've been super fortunate, and I do everything I can. So within my circle of influence, I help others to follow it too. Hopefully, we'll expand.
I'm sure it has. There's not too many people that I know that don't know who you are, so I think your circle of influence is highly understated here. But thank you very much for being on the show. This has been fantastic. We've been talking about it for so long, and we're going to follow up this with a Spanish one at some point when we can find the time to book. But it has been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show, Patricio.
Por supuesto, Max. Thank you. Ciao, hasta la vista.
Yeah, y que se cuiden. And until the next show, make sure you guys share and download, click all the links, and do what you can to follow the podcast. We've been having a lot of fun with all our guests, and absolutely make sure you follow up and become a member of the association. We got lots of new fantastic programs rolling out, and there's chapters all across Canada, and we're looking to expand into the US as well. So lots of cool stuff coming up right away. Make sure that you're a member, and we'll see you at the next show. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
You've been listening to the CWB Association Welding Podcast with Max Ceron. If you enjoyed what you heard today, rate our podcast and visit us at cwbassociation.org to learn more. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions on what you'd like to learn about in the future. Produced by the CWB Group and presented by Max Ceron. This podcast serves to educate and connect the welding community. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.